way too much. And I have a question for you because I honestly can't remember. Did I talk just a little bit about Thomas Chesson-Birch's model of temperament? Easy, difficult, slow to warm infants. Does that sound at all familiar aside from your book?
Yeah.
From me or just from your book? Okay, yeah, it's in one of the slides. I couldn't remember if we talked about it. We're going to start with a little review of that and what we mean by temperament, because I want to then introduce you to Kagan's model, which is like a biological explanation for temperament. So let's review what those temperaments are. And the question that we might ask, I was going to do this systematically and ask you to describe your level of a trait. And this is how, actually, just give this thought for a minute. Let's say the trait is what we call inhibitedness. And this is what Kagan talks about also. Kagan's model is going to identify traits in terms of being inhibited or uninhibited. And since I already talked about this, it won't be a surprise to you, but you can still think about this. So what are you like? Are you tending to be like inhibited, which is like sensitive? You don't want to do something wrong. You don't like getting yelled at. Cautious. You're not going to, dive into the water, so to speak. Kind of more on the quiet side, a little bit avoiding, maybe you avoid confrontations or you keep to yourself a bit. Withdrawn, maybe. A little bit wary, unsure about new. So think about if that fits you now, or if you're more on the other dimension, uninhibited, fearless. You're going to jump in head first and worry later, right? You're motivated to approach social situations or new situations. You're kind of bold. Where do you fall on the continuum in your adult life here? Kind of what I'm wondering. And if we were going to do this systematically, I'd ask you to rate from 1 to 10. Could I see in the classroom 1 to 10, hold up the number of fingers corresponding where you'd put yourself? 10. So 1 is very inhibited. You're on that cautious side to the extreme. And 10 is you're very uninhibited. You're just out there boldly moving forward. Scale of 1 to 10. Where do you put yourself? And people on Zoom, where do you put it in the chat? Just curiosity. Where do you put yourself on this continuum? All right, let's see it here on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Kind of in the middle or on the lower end in here, and in the chat, I guess it's a secret maybe, or maybe I'm just not seeing the chat. Chat disappeared. There we go. All right, kind of in the mid-range in this room. All right, that's kind of interesting. So then this is the question we ask when we think about temperament. Were you born this way? Or is it some consequence of your environment? I'm just picking Darian. Were you born? Whatever number you said, were you born that way?
No.
No. Okay.
I was quiet. I kept myself in a way.
So you were born with a certain temperament that was quiet, and then you changed to a more uninhibited temperament. To what do you attribute that?
My job.
You had to learn new skills. Oh, you've just highlighted the difference between temperament and personality. Because temperament is just that. It's what you're born with, right? And personality is what you turn into as a result of your life situation, right? Now, it's unlikely that you're going to start out inhibited and develop into someone who's diving into all the water, speaking metaphorically, right? You're not likely to go that far, but your environment can really shape your personality to be quite different. And that's what we're going to get at right at the start here by reviewing Thomas Chesson-Birch's model in a little bit more detail, just a tiny bit, and then getting into Kagan's model along with a short video. So once again, just repeating what I said, temperament, these are innate characteristics of the infant, right? Including those things, mood, activity, emotional reactivity. And you can see these right after birth. All right, it's right out in that infant, maybe not in the first couple of days, but once that infant is settled into the world, you're going to see those traits. And just like we learned through Darian's experience, it's different from personality because personality are the patterns, right? Those same consistent patterns that we demonstrate, but based on not just temperament, but also experience. So we can change that. And we went through this framework last time, I believe, so we won't focus on it. We talk about the most inhibited temperament, anyone who said 1 on that scale, to the least inhibited, anyone who said 10. And maybe the genotype is right here, and the phenotype expands beyond that. We aren't likely to change from one way to the other, barring like a really dramatic life-changing experience, but there's a range that can become a phenotype. So let's just jump a little bit into Thomas Chesenberg. So I think that I mentioned, okay, I don't know if I told you about the study, it's old, but it was long-term. So it took them a long time to do this, studying the development, temperament, and personality across the lifespan. And so they did structured interviews with parents. They went in and observed them. They had grad students who went into these homes and observed the infants on multiple occasions, as well as interviews. And that's what this is based on. And then they identified like 3 clusters of things that they could pick out in these infants. And the first is emotionality, like how big are their emotional responses? Like, you know, when a kettle falls on the floor, or kind of just minor. Activity, how busy are they? Do they always need to be doing something kind of thing? We're talking infants, but sociability, how much do they engage people? And then inhibition, the trait that Kagan is going to focus on in a moment. And so looking first at the easy temperament, which accounts for a little less than half of the infants. We looked at this in the last class too, but just so you remember what it is, we consider easy to be low emotional. They're not overreacting to situations, to stimuli. They're like kind of calm. Their activity, they get onto a nice schedule. They're kind of calm, kind of chill. Their sociability is high. They're usually cheerful. They're smiling. They're engaging people. And they're not inhibited. They're not scared of new situations. So a little less than half at that time. This is, you know, most of what we do in here is based on, there's a word for it and I can't think of it. It's based on like a lot of white people. At 1970 psychology, that's the way it would have been. And one of the things I'd like you to think about is whether your experience suggests that it might be different for people who are Navajo or other kinds of people. Or is this consistent? So the difficult temperament, relatively few. Word temperament got cut off there, about 10%. And we look at these things, high emotionality, right? They're really reacting a lot, then loud. You know, crying a lot, kind of easily upset. If something frustrates them, they might be like really you know, exasperated with that and expressing it loudly. It's going to be harder to get them onto an eating or sleeping schedule. If they are nursing, they're easily going to be pulled off of what they're doing by distractions. They might not sleep that well because they awaken easily. They're not super social because they're kind of a lot of times feeling negative. You know, they're in a fretful mood and they don't adapt easily to new situations, and they might be inhibited. They might withdraw in the face of new stimuli, not want to go to grandma or your friend. And I think we talked about how when you are a parent to the child, like to a child with this temperament, it's easy to make 2 mistakes. Mistake A, thinking that you did something to cause that. And if all your friends have really easy babies and you've got this difficult baby, you might be saying, I'm no kind of a parent. What am I doing wrong? People with difficult children, infants should never do that. The second mistake is to assume I have this difficult baby. He's going to be a super grumpy kid and difficult all his life or her life. Also wrong. This is a stage. This is this infant's adjustment to the world, and that's what they're having a difficult time with. But Felicia, I see you smiling back there. I know you have lots of experience. Is it true that a difficult baby can grow into a very agreeable, pleasant child? Or yes, so all right. So it's a hard time though if you have a difficult baby. And then just briefly, the slow to warm. And I know I described this as the baby who's, you know, staring at you in church, looking at you from behind, or in some sort of a public setting where they're just staring at you and not smiling and not crying, right? So low emotionality, you know, they get themselves on a regular schedule. It's not that they're unsocial. but they're just not going out of their way to be social. So they're not smiling, you know, at you. They might be staring at you, interested. They might not want to go into your arms until they know you and trust you. This infant is slow to warm. They tend to be inhibited, but they're not super emotional and upset like the difficulty. So that's our starting point. And we point out that greater than that, a good percentage of these infants can't be categorized. So they don't all fit in. So now let's take a look at Kagan's model, because Kagan explains this to us from a biological perspective that we'll first look at with me, and then we'll look at this little video, about 6 minutes of it. So first off, he says these traits that infants have are related to inborn temperaments. Let's see if I get my pen to it. There we go. Okay, it's working, it's a little delay. So first off, he says this trait is due to particular physiological characteristics. So we have some babies that are born with high levels of norepinephrine, and I wrote down on the side that is produced by the sympathetic nervous system, makes the heart beat faster, and so the child might feel nervous because there's a stimuli, the heart's beating faster. All right, we have high amygdala activation. Amygdala is linked to what? Anyone know? Emotion in the brain, especially fear response. Okay, and greater sympathetic activation doesn't mean that they feel sorry for people, right? What it's talking about is the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system that causes you to be aroused in the face of frightening things or, you know, gets you moving. So it's good we have that. And he says that infants who are born with physiological characteristics tend to have an inhibited temperament. They're more fearful. Of course they are. Their nervous system is pumping up every time something happens. They're just born that way. It's not their fault. And it's not even necessarily bad. I mean, we don't necessarily need a lot of people who are always charging at the world. And so consequently, though, someone who's always scared, a certain kind of parenting style can yield different outcomes for them. So if you have this fearful temperament, sympathetic nervous system always acting up, and you overprotect and shelter them, or you're excessively harsh, they do something wrong and you're like, I don't ever want to see you do that again, right? What's going to happen to their sympathetic nervous system? It's going to jump. They're going to continue to be afraid, right? And so that might lead to this kind of unassertive, depressed personality. We start inhibited, we end up unassertive, depressed, but what's the mediary? It's the parenting. On the other hand, you have the very same inhibited temperament with strong sympathetic activation, and the parents are gentle, and they encourage the child to explore when they're scared. They don't just push them in, right? They're kind of gentle and let the child take their time. And what do we end up with? Well, quite a well-adapted personality in adulthood. So you can see that this alignment of the parent to the child becomes fairly important. Now, on the other hand, we have some kids, maybe you know someone like this, they are just out there. They're super busy all the time. They aren't afraid of anything. They're the first one down that giant slide and they fall down and get right back up and they're charging at everything in life. And you maybe reprimand them and ask them to stop and they don't even hear you, right? And the outcome for this child could be kind of not very good, right? It could be kind of aggressive, antisocial. They never learn to control themselves in that way, right? So they have this uninhibited temperament. You know, if you go up to them and say, now, do you think that was a good idea? Well, this child might be running around in circles, and this child, you might say, no, you're not doing it, right? Very different style needed. Sorry, darling. Ariane, sorry. And so we need this firm, direct discipline. It doesn't have to be harsh and like violent or anything like that, but it's got to be pretty firm, direct. Okay, as opposed to like this ambiguous, not certain discipline, which is maybe going to nourish this child in doing what they want when they want to, right? So you want to nourish the traits that you want your child to develop, and that means seeing your child. Who is this particular child who came into our life? You know, and not just seeing the child as a reflection of you, which is really easy to do when you're a young parent, especially a first-time parent, right? Each one is different, right? Felicia, I call on her because I know she's had a lot of experience with many children. So each one pretty different, okay? It can be hard to change, but you know it doesn't have to be exactly alike. And now I want to play this little video. It's a part of a rather old video, but it's, again, a really good one. And you're gonna hear, they're gonna give us a primate model here, because a lot of times we can learn from primate models. And I wanna just get this started. Okay, so here we go. And we're gonna pull this forward to 48 seconds. We already saw the visual clip. And so let's continue on from there. And hold on a second, I just got to get the sound activated here faster.
Temperament. Some babies are excitable and active, while others are calm and passive. This is true regardless of the culture. Such temperaments exhibited at birth are biologically based. They are constitutional tendencies that can affect the child's personality. Harvard psychologist Jerome Kagan has been studying inherited behavioral differences between timid and bold children. Kagan and his colleagues observed the children on closed-circuit television.
Our general view is this, that a small proportion of children, we think maybe 10 to 15%, but no more, are born with a slight push from nature to be either very outgoing, the way that child with the drum is, or with a slight bias to be fearful, vigilant, apprehensive, cautious. Although there are other temperamental variables, it might be that this is the most salient temperamental quality in mammals. That's just a possibility. So there's no fundamental difference in intellectual ability or abilities between the two groups.
Wow.
None of us believes parents should be fatalists. That is to say, we have many cases of parents who nature gave them a cautious child, and through gentle handling, introduction of their child to other peers, a gentle persuasion of their child to try to conquer their apprehensions, we have seen these children change. And therefore, there's no need to say, there's nothing I can do just because their child happened to begin life with a slight push in this direction.
So biology is not destiny. Born shy doesn't necessarily mean a lifetime of shyness. Later experiences can enable some to overcome their shyness while creating shyness in others. In addition to shyness, the personality trait that shows the most genetic influence is activity level. But once again, though biologically based, this trait can be modified by learning, training, and experience. Research with animals tells us more about these traits. Here at the National Institutes of Mental Health Animal Center, Stephen Sumi has been studying the behavior of genetically shy monkeys.
It appears that shyness is inherited. That is, genetic differences between individuals largely determine which individual will be shy. And those individuals that have this characteristic start showing it very early in life. Within the first 2 or 3 weeks of life, for example, we can begin to see differences between the shy monkeys and those that are not, because those that are not begin to leave their mother to explore, but the shy ones stay back and seek their mother's contact for protection. We've been able to change the behavior of some of our shy monkeys by rearing them with unusually nurturant foster mothers, mothers who are supportive and protective at all times. And with these mothers giving these monkeys a good firm basis and support network, they show good outgoing behavior, they interact readily with their peers, and in some cases they may turn out to be the dominant members of their social group. But if you take away the support network of these individuals, they revert right back to their shy behavior. It's almost as if you were turning a switch on and off. It looks like the basis for this shyness in monkeys is very similar, if not identical, to the basis for shyness in humans. We know this in terms of the types of behavior that are shown and at what points in development, where there are strong parallels. We know it in terms of the underlying physiological systems, where the same characteristics physiologically that identify our shy monkeys also can be found in shy humans. And we also believe that the connection is there because just like you can modify shy behavior in humans, you can also modify it in monkeys through certain types of experience.
There's also clear evidence that genetic influences are significant for some cognitive abilities, such as verbal skills.
Okay, that was the relevant segment of that little video. So it really helped illustrate it. I hope that you also thought so, but it just means there is this temperament. You're not likely to flip it all the way to the other extreme, but you can adjust it through what we call, actually, moving to the next content, goodness of fit. And here we go. So goodness of fit is just this match, right? The matchup between the child and who the child is, their temperament, and the parenting style. And so for an inhibited temperament, you need to be a safe haven. We're going to look at that phrase later, but they need to know that you're there. You can give them time to adjust, and you can keep gentle language. They don't need fierce corrections, you know. And likewise, the uninhibited temperament, well, you need to provide new experiences. This child needs it, right? And also lots of physical activity, room for them to move around. If you need to make a correction, well, first off, choose your battles. You know, don't pick on the little ones, right? But choose the big ones, and when you do, be very direct and stern, and then assist them in setting boundaries, because what you really want for them is